Okay, so a little bit of review, really fast, what we did last week for Chapter 14. Basically, we went over how to use the two tables that we're going to use in Chapter 14. So let's imagine, if you will, that we're buying a snowmobile for $4,500. We put 20% down and finance the rest for 3 years at $120 a month. Tell me how much interest I'm going to pay for this particular loan, and tell me what the APR for this loan is. Now, note, I just asked those specific questions. You may want to do everything else that normally we do on these sorts of questions first, but whatever. All right? So, technically, how much do we put down? $900, right? Because 20% of $4,500, 0.2 times $4,500 is $900, right? So, how much did we borrow?
$3,600.
The difference? All right, so technically, after you do the amount financed, normally you calculate the monthly payment, but how much is our monthly payment?
$120.
Because I gave it to you. Freebie stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, now, normally I call the next line the finance charge. How do you find the finance charge? Yeah, amount that you're paying for financing, right? 36 months at $120 per month, minus the amount that you borrowed, $3,600. How much interest do we wind up paying?
$720.
And note, folks, finance charge and interest are the same thing, right? You need to be able to give me that answer for either question that I ask, right? So if I give it to you in business style, I'll ask for finance charge. If I'm going sort of traditional, I'll say, hey, give me interest, all right? Just make sure you keep those two separate. Technically, I didn't ask for this, but what's the deferred payment amount? How much am I really paying for this snowmobile?
$4,320. That's all right.
No. What's the price of it?
Oh, how much are you actually paying for?
Yeah, how much am I actually paying for it?
Oh, okay. $220. Yeah.
Right. Price plus the finance charge. Don't add the amount financed plus the finance charge. Okay. So now, how do you find APR again? What's the technique?
Finance charge divided by amount finance times 100.
Finance charge divided by amount financed times 100. Finance charge divided by amount financed times 100. Right? And you can see that by looking in the tables under that table 14-1. I mean, that's what the title of the table is called, right? Amount financed per finance charge per $100 of amount financed, right? So what's 720 divided by 3,600 times 100?
I got 20.
I got 20 as well.
I put the wrong number.
There you go.
That's not.
Exactly 20. So now, how do we use that number? Does this mean that I paid 20%?
No.
What does it mean? What do I do to use this number? So the key, folks, is remember, find closest number in the table 14.1 on row 36, where row is technically the number of months of payments that you're making, right? So you start there over on page 38, and you start going to the right, looking for a number that's close to 20.
When you say 20, are you talking 20% or what are
No,
we talking?
20.00, right? This is the number we're looking for on row 36.
Oh, okay. See, that's where I was getting mixed up.
Oh, and look, there's a number. There's a spot on the table that's exactly 20.00, right?
Yeah.
And when you find that number, go up the column to figure out what percentage you're at.
Oh, 20. Is that 2.5?
This number is in 12.25% column, and therefore that's what your APR is. Okay, folks? That's how that table works. It's weird, but you got to be able to deal with it, all right? Please do not tell me it's 20%, because that's just flat out wrong, right? The 20 works out to be 12.25%, totally a different number, okay? Does everybody see how to get that 12.25? It's on page 40 in the tables, technically. So the idea is look on row 36 to keep going to the right until you find the number 20.00. Now, however you guys want to take notes to make sure that you understand how to do that, that's cool. Again, it's just weird. That's why I wanted to make sure we did at least one more of those, because it's just a little different, all right? And remember, sometimes the number won't always be exactly the number in the table, and then your job is to find the one that's closest, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be lower or higher, it's just whichever one's closer. Bam. Use that percent. All right? All right, so, not bad? Okay, so what if I gave you the other type of problem? So, I buy a new $2,500 TV. I put 10% down and finance the rest for, let's say I financed it for 30 months at 8.5%. So here I've given you the APR. I've told you that the APR is 8.5%. And let's suppose that this time all I ask for is find the monthly payment. Alright, so in this one, just be careful. Make sure you don't forget to take care of the down payment, right? How much should I put down, folks? Put down $250. So how much should I borrow? Just by subtracting. And now, how do we use table 14.2? Technically, that's on page 45 of the business handbook, folks, the second to last page of the tables.
Would you say, what was the interest rate? 8.5?
8.5.
Okay.
It's the loan amortization table or the monthly payment per $1,000 to pay principal and interest. So you take the amount financed, $2,250, divide by 1,000. Remember to always divide by 1,000, and then just multiply by the table value. So 8.5% row 30 months. What is that?
And then multiply it by the table
Yep.
value?
So this is kind of a little bit more traditional way of using tables. It's kind of like what we were doing back in chapters 12 and 13. You look the value up, you multiply by the value that, or multiply by that table value, and you get the answer that you're looking for. So what am I going to pay per month to get this TV?
Want to make sure I did it right.
Again, that 37.12 comes from the page 45 table, 8.5%. Please note, do not use the APR table to calculate this number. If you look up 8.5% for 30 months, you will find a different number in the APR table, folks. Okay? The APR calculations are different than these, so just be careful. Only use the APR tables to calculate the APR. That's why they called them the APR tables. So, okay? Alright. Not too bad? Alright, so. Those are the standard types of questions that are in Chapter 14 mostly. Now, the other type of question that you get to deal with are credit cards. So, folks, how do credit cards work? Is it free money? It's not free money? Come on. Don't you just go up there, use it, and never have to pay for anything? Alright, what? The cool thing about credit cards, folks, it's a short-term loan, usually less than 30 days, alright? And the thing about it is where you pay 0 interest if you make payments on time and in full. And this is why credit cards are a very, very handy tool, folks. You don't have to walk around with wads and wads of cash in your pocket to buy stuff. You can just go in and say, if I need a $250 item, you don't have to pull out $250 in cash. You just run your credit card, and then at the end of the month or whenever your credit card bills due, you pay them however much you owe them, no interest. Okay, this is why they are very handy tools. The problem with it, of course, is that does everybody pay their bill off at the end of every billing period? No. And this is where credit card companies make a little bit of their money. Please note, folks, that that's not, when you pay interest on your credit card, folks, that's pure bonus money for credit card companies. The way credit card companies actually make their money is that every time you use that credit card, the credit card company will only pay the vendor that you bought that item from between 98 and 97.5% of what you really bought. They keep 2 to 3% of everything that you purchase using the credit card. So if you go and buy a $100 item at the store, so you go to Kohl's and buy a $100 item, Kohl's will get $98 from the credit card company. They get to keep the other 2. Okay? Every time you use the credit card, it's a 2 to 3% charge that the credit card company keeps from the vendor. Not from you, right? We pay $100 for the item. They just take the $100 and give 98 of it to Kohl's and keep the other 2. Alright? That's how they stay afloat. Now, all of that extra money that you pay when you pay interest, that's just pure bonus money for credit card companies. This is why their CEOs get millions and millions and millions of dollars of bonuses every year. Because there's lots of people that are paying interest on their credit card. So, there. Now, the question is, how do we calculate interest? If you don't pay in full, and on time, you are assessed and credit cards are just the same as banks, folks. They don't call it interest, they call it a finance charge. But it really is just interest. And guess how they calculate interest on your credit card? No. Nope. The cool thing about credit card companies, folks, is that the way they have to calculate their interest is actually using simple interest. And what is simple interest?
Right.
Yeah. They calculate using simple interest. You would think it's some really nasty, cool, awesome formula that would be really scary, right? No. We actually know it already. Alright? Calculation is simple interest. I equals PRT. Now, there are some conditions behind all of this, folks. When they go to calculate what the interest is, or the finance charge, if you will, P is the average daily balance for your billing cycle. Okay? Most credit card companies abbreviate this with the phrase ADB. In fact, they don't ever have to actually say the phrase average daily balance. They actually can just use the abbreviation and assume that you know what it means. They lobbied for that very hard to make sure that they didn't have to say average daily balance, right? Guess what R is? Yeah, it's the rate on the card, right? Rate on the card. And guess, since it's a rate, what do you have to do with the rate? Convert it to a decimal, just like always. Just like all the things we did back in Chapter 10 with I equals PRT, they still apply. And T, folks, please note that the way the book explains time for these particular credit cards is actually incorrect. The laws have changed since this book was published. So the way the book does it is actually wrong. The way it works is it's days in your billing cycle divided by 365. So the way the book explains it is that you get charged a monthly interest fee, and so you take your percentage rate and divide it by 12, and they assume that that's how you do your interest calculations. That's just wrong, folks. That's pre-2008. So new laws came out in 2008 to force credit card companies to be a little bit more accurate in their calculation of finance charges, and so they must use standard exact time to do it. Okay? All right. So, that's not too bad, right? Now, unfortunately, what do they mean by that? What is the average daily balance? So imagine, if you will, folks, that you take out a credit card and your first billing cycle starts on, like, November 1st. And on November 23rd, you go to the store and you're like, oh, I'm going to break in my new credit card. And you buy $100 worth of groceries. Okay? Now, you bought it on November 23rd. Your statement's going to end on November 30th. How many days did you borrow that $100?
Technically, wouldn't you divide it by 30? You get your average daily balance, because when they use the whole billing cycle.
Okay, that's exactly right. So they're using the whole billing cycle, and you have to use the average of every day in the billing cycle. So if you're going from November 1st to November 30th, technically there's 30 days. But how many days did you borrow that $100?
You said when did you borrow it?
23rd.
7 days.
7 days. So there is how you actually have to start calculating the average. Because really you didn't borrow it for a full 30 days of $100, right? You only borrowed it for 7. The average daily balance takes that into account. So,
Also, they don't make you go right from the 1st to the 30th?
nope. They don't charge you the interest on the full balance of your statement, right? In theory, that's the way they did it when they first started. When credit cards first started, if your statement said you owe $100, your interest was based off of $100, period. Even if you made that $100 purchase the day before your billing cycle ended, they didn't care. But the law started noticing that was a scam, yeah. Then they were cheating in theory, and so they started regulating, right? So, oops, I'm red. Find the average daily balance. So, let's actually do that example. What was the real average daily balance for that example, right? So, billing cycle starts on November 1st and ends on November 30th. We make one purchase of $100 on November 23rd. Okay. So first thing, remember this is an average daily balance. How do you calculate an average again? Add up the number of numbers, divide by the number of numbers, right? How many numbers are in my average daily balance?
7.
How many numbers? How many days are in the billing cycle?
7.
30.
Oh, 30.
30 days in the billing cycle, right? I want the average daily balance for my entire November 1st to November 30th billing cycle. So, I need 30 numbers to average.
When's the first lot be all zero?
Okay, let me get there. What's my first number? How much money did I borrow on November 1st? 0, right? Because I haven't bought the food yet. I don't buy it until the 23rd, right? How much money did I borrow on the 2nd?
0.
Do I need to do the 3rd?
No.
Okay, good. All the way up to the 22nd, I've borrowed nothing. So I've got 22 zeros that I'm averaging together. And then finally on the 23rd, how much do I borrow? $100. How much to borrow on the 24th?
0.
Did I pay that $100 off? I still borrowed it.
No.
It's still $100, right? So 25th, 30th. Now, average those 30 numbers. How many of these numbers do we have again? How many zeros did we have?
It just seems so accomplished.
I'm making it complicated
No
to prove a point, right? And to prove to you that it's not as simple as you think it is, right? Because it does take a little bit of work. Now, how many 100s do we have?
7.
8. Why is it 8,
It was
folks?
23rd to 30th. It's 8. Right.
23rd to the 30th, inclusive on both ends, is 8 days, right?
Right.
And remember, how many days are in the billing cycle? 30. You better have 22 plus 8 add up to 30, right? Okay, so now you've got 22 zeros and 8 100s. Average those 30 numbers. How do you do it? What do you get when you add 22 zeros together? Nothing. Good. What do you get when you add 8 100s together? What's 800 divided by 30?
26.
Technically, folks, for that billing cycle, my average daily balance was $26.67. So if I don't pay the $100 in full, they can charge me interest on this much money, not the $100, okay? So again, it's not the $100, right? You owe $100, but if you only pay $50, they're going to charge you a finance charge, and the finance charge will be based off of $26.67, okay? Because it's based off of your average daily balance, all right? This is how it works. This is literally how it works, folks. I mean, they go through this every month when they do their credit card statements. All right? So let's create a credit card statement that's a little bit more complicated than one purchase and see how it works. Yeah? Is that better, Ryan?
That's a little bit more. Alright, thanks. Got it.
Good, Ryan?
Yep.
Okay. So, now let's have a more realistic credit card statement. And let's have it look like a credit card statement, too. So, we don't have to have too many purchases, but let's at least have a few, right? All right, so if you've never gotten a credit card statement, folks, this is kind of what it looks like. You get 3 pieces of information. Sometimes you get 4, depending on what type you're working with. Date, description, and amount. So every time you use your credit card, whether you're swiping it or you're calling up Amazon and telling them to charge it to your credit card account, this is what they're doing, is they're stamping this notice of information on the credit card statement so that you know what you did, all right? So, please note, folks, that most billing cycles do not start on the beginning of the month, okay? They just don't. I don't know of any credit card where they actually really start on the first of the month. They start close, but not always, right? Well, so let's suppose that our billing cycle starts on, let's keep it a nice month. So like, say, March 5th of this year. Let's assume that it's a 31-day cycle. Now, I will warn you folks that technically the number of days in your billing cycle can change whenever your credit card company wants to change them. It does have to be at least 22 days, and it does need to be less than 33 days, but anytime they want, between the 22nd and the 33rd day of your billing cycle, they could cut your statement and say, now it's due, and send it to you. Now, granted, they always have to give you a 2-week cushion once they make the cut, but when they make that cut, whether it's 30 days, 31, 29, 25, they can pick and choose. Right? It's in the small print if you ever read the small print of a credit card contract, which I would assume no one in their entire life ever has, because it's like 18 pages long and it's ridiculous. It's all written in legal mumbo jumbo. Right? So anyways, let's assume that on March 9th, I bought some gas. It was my car, so it was $20. And note, folks, I will be nice. Not only on tests, but also in examples. I will make sure that there are no pennies. Okay, that's just it's a pain. Okay, in fact, I won't even give you dollar amounts that go down to the ones. I'll always be ending in zeros or fives, so that the adding and subtracting is simple. All right. You're welcome.
I was going to say thank you.
All right, let's suppose that then on March 12th, what did I have to buy? Food. It was me going to the grocery store, so it was only $50 instead of $200 like my wife. She buys real food, I don't. All right, then let's suppose that on March 22nd, what did I need to buy? Clothes. Was it me or my wife?
Thank you.
Me? Okay, so then it was probably $80.
So it's good. I mean,
Pair of slacks and a shirt. Needed new stuff.
How are you?
And then on 23rd, folks, I need gas again. It was my wife's car. She's got a bigger tank. And then last but not least, let's suppose that on the 30th, what did I need?
Your wife needed clothes.
you need a clause.
Clothes for my wife.
I was going to say 200, but wow.
Well, it's My wife's very good about buying clothes, though. She'll spend $300 and it'll be like 3 outfits. She'll take them all home, try them all on, walk around in them, and then take 2 of them back. She's good about it like that, which is very nice. That's the way she buys shoes, too. She buys shoes in stacks of 8. And Zappos ships us a box of 8 pairs of shoes, and I'm just looking at it going, how much is that? She's like, oh, it's $700 or $800. She'll try them all on and go, well, I like 1 pair. She'll keep 1 pair and then ship all the rest back. And I'm okay with that, right? As long as she really ships them all back. All right, so, folks, find the average daily balance for this billing cycle, okay? Find ADB for this cycle. And assume that I carried no money over from the prior cycle. So I'm sitting at $0 right now owed on March 5th. So, now, how many numbers do I need to average together, folks? 31, because it is a 31-day cycle. Okay, please note, however many days are in your billing cycle, that's the number of days that numbers you need to average together. Okay? So, I need 31 numbers for my 31-day cycle. All right. What's my first number, folks?
Sorry, I didn't write as fast as you got it, so.
So how much money did I borrow on March 5th?
$20.
March 5th.
Oh, I'm sorry. 0.
0 on March 5th, right? Because I haven't made any purchases yet. My first number is technically 0, right? Now, remember that these numbers repeat based on how many days nothing happens, right? So how many days does the 0 persist?
4.
4. March 5th, March 6th, March 7th, and then March 8th. There's 4 numbers. And then on March 9th, I finally make a purchase. So I have 4 zeros. So there are 4 days that I have 0. All right? This is from March 5th, 3/5 to 3/8. Right? Looks like it should only be 3 days, but it's inclusive of that March 5th, right? 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Now, what does my number turn on March 9th? 20. Okay. Now, how many times does that 20 repeat?
3.
9th, 10th, and 11th, right? 3
Right.
days of repeating, because then on the 12th, I make a new purchase. That number has changed. So it's going to be 3 days from 3/9 to 3/11. Now, here's where you got to be savvy, folks. How much did I borrow on March 12th? $70. Because did I pay that $20 yet?
Nope.
No. And if I made another $50 purchase, it gets tacked on. So note, one of the other things that a credit card company will sometimes do is have a 4th column that has your running total while you're going. Okay? Some do, some don't. It varies from credit card to credit card. Most of them do now, actually. So, all right. So 70 now is my next number. Now, how many times does 70 repeat? 10 days, 9 days, 11 days. What is it? Count it if you have to, right?
9
Fingers
days.
and toes.
Should be 9 days.
12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st.
That's
10 days. Note, if you need to take off your shoes and socks when the test comes around so you can get to your toes, I'll understand. I like to use days that are often more than 10 days so that you might need your toes. Okay? For this one, though, it's 10 days. From the 12th to the 21st. Because the 22nd is when I make a new purchase, right? So, what do I do on the 22nd? I spend $80. What do I do with that $80? Add it to the 70 so it turns into 150, right? So note, while you're going, you keep adding, all right? Now, how many days does 150?
2. 22nd? Yeah.
Exactly, 22nd. Never mind, yes. 1. Good job, Greg.
Hey. My
So this
toes.
is-
Okay, I'm missing a toe.
This
Never
is
mind.
one
Extra
day.
toe.
It only goes for the 22nd, right? Because then the 23rd, we make a new purchase, the number changes again. Okay, so don't freak on that one. Alright, so what's my next number?
180.
180. Because again, we add the 30. And now, how many days does that go?
8.
Count 'em.
Did.
Yes, 7. 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. Don't count the 30th, because the 30th is where the number changes. So 7. And note what's happening to each of those numbers, folks. How many times did the zeros repeat? 4. What is 9 minus 5? 4. What was the next number of repeats? The $20, how many times did it repeat? 3. What's 12 minus 9? 3. You literally can subtract the dates, folks. That's how it works, right? What's 22 minus 12? 10. That was our next number for repeats. What's 23 minus 22? 1. That was our number for repeats on the next one. Last but not least, what's 30 minus 23? 7, that was our last number of repeats, okay? So that actually works because you're including the first day but not including the last day, okay? So this was from the 23rd to the 29th. What's my last number, folks? 480. Now here's a slightly tricky problem. How many days does that repeat?
I'm not answering. That should be 1.
What do you think it is?
1.
Is this just a March billing cycle, folks? When did the billing cycle start?
Oh.
On the 5th. When does it end? 31 days later. How many numbers do I need to have?
31.
31. So without even figuring out the date, folks, tell me what this number has to be.
Okay, help that out. 25.
6.
This has to be 6. Why is it 6?
25.
Uh-huh.
Right there.
This is 25 days. And since this is your last row, it has to have the rest of your days to get to 31. This is 31 minus 25. It has to be 6. Okay? If you would like to figure out what the date is, you are more than welcome to. But it doesn't matter. Okay? That's the joy behind it. Is that you can always say, for the last row, make sure the numbers add up to the number of days in your billing cycle, and you are done. Now the only thing you have to do is average those numbers. Again, what does this table mean? What does the 0 with the 4 next to it mean? There are 4 zeros, right? What does the 3 next to the 20 mean? 3 20s. Hopefully you guys won't really do 20 plus 20 plus 20. What will you really do?
20 times 30.
You will use your math skills.
No way.
Because you are math savvy, and you will say, hey, I know all I really have to do is multiply these numbers to figure out what their sums are, right? So you'll say, oh, this is 0, this is 60. What do 1070s add up to? 700. What does 150 add up to?
Probably 1.
What do 7 180s add up to?
1260.
1260, I'll buy that.
For a buck.
And last but not least, how much do 6 480s add up to?
2880.
So what does the sum of all of my numbers work out to be?
50-50.
50-50. Interesting number.
And
Now, what do I do with that 50-50?
Divided by 31.
Okay, good. Don't forget that then the average daily balance is that sum of all of your numbers, the 31 numbers that you had, the 31 daily balances, divided by 31. So what was my average balance?
162.90.
162.90. That's how you calculate average daily balance. Okay? Now, tacking on to that problem, folks, if my card has a 19.9% rate and I pay less than the full amount, what's going to be my finance charge?
Is this where you
Find finance charge.
This is where you take the rate times that.
Yeah, this is where you use the I equals PRT. Okay? And you use the average daily balance as your P. Okay? So even though technically you owe $480, right? I mean, your credit card statement says you owe $480. If you don't pay the full $480, so say you send them a check for $400, they're going to ding you with a charge next month, and it's going to be based off of the average daily balance of the month, this $162.90. Okay, that's the only reason you use this number, is to calculate interest. So you grab, was it 162.90? Yeah. 162.90 times my rate, 19.99, so 0.199. Again, convert it to a decimal. And now what's my time for this billing cycle?
Is this where you take 31 divided by 365?
31 over 365, exactly. So the number of days in your billing cycle over 365. So how much interest will I wind up paying on this credit card if I don't pay my balance? $3 or $4? Not even $2.
Well, I'm going to decimal point because I came up with 275. So yeah, it's too
Make sure you do 0.19.
That's where I did it. That's where I did it wrong. I went 19.9.
So note, folks, the interest on this credit card, it's not as scary as everybody seems to think it is, right? It's not even $3.
Do you know where's the shortcut?
There's no shortcut on this one, sorry. I mean, this one you really just have to do it the long way, right? And if you don't trust your credit card company, which you shouldn't, by the way, every now and then, at least once a year, folks, I take out my credit card statement and I make sure that they calculate this correctly. Because I don't trust them. Not even a little bit, right? Granted, I never really actually pay any interest because I pay my balance in full every month so that I don't pay interest. But I still want to make sure that they're calculating the values correctly, and they have to report it. That's another thing that the regulations have forced credit card companies to do, is that if you every credit card statement they build must tell you what the average daily balance of it is, in the off chance that you don't pay in full. Okay? Alright, so not too bad. Okay, so you want a funkier one?
No.
Sink your teeth in?
And I said, go home, we got this nailed.
Alright, let's try one more.
Works for me.
We have to do chapter 15 first.
This is 15, isn't it?
No, this is still 14.
Oh, it is.
This is still a short-term loan.
Oh, good Lord.
Chapter 15 is long-term loans. Alright, so let's suppose our billing cycle starts on, let's say it starts on April 4th of this year. And is a 29-day billing cycle. Alright? And let's imagine, if you will, folks, that I carry over a balance. Carry a balance of $150. Let's suppose that last month when I paid my statement, I just didn't have enough to pay it in full. So I sent them enough money so that after they charged me a finance charge, I wound up owing $150. Exactly. It was serendipitous. Alright? So, here's my statement for this month, though. We'll just have, let's have 5 things happening, and that's not too bad. Okay, so let's suppose that on April 10th, first of every statement's always gas, $30. And then let's imagine that on the 15th, my wife returned some of those outfits from last month, right? She bought $300 worth of clothes. Well, she did her standard, tried all 3 of them on, said 2 of these need to go back. So she returns $200 worth of money for clothes in this particular case. And note how it gets entered, okay? There is a minus sign in front of the 200 to indicate that this is a debit instead of a credit to your account, right? This is actually decreasing the balance, not increasing the balance, okay? So when you get to this credit line, instead of adding this number, what are you going to do? Subtract it, right? So it's going to lower your average daily balance while we're going, all right? So now let's go, move on a little bit. Let's go to the let's go for the 21st. And let's suppose that, what do we need on the 21st?
Gas.
More gas?
Well, it's been 11 days.
I tried really hard. Go 2 weeks. Yeah, okay, you're right.
That's 2 weeks if you go just working.
$20. But let's suppose that at the same time, on the same day, my wife is also using the same credit card, and she went to the store and got food. So she spent $150. And then for kicks and giggles, let's suppose that on the 30th, I had to buy books, and it cost me $300. Wow. All right, so now let's find the ADB. This one's a little bit more interesting. All right, so again, this is how you want to sort of start the same way, right? What's my very first number? 150, because I carried a balance over. I don't get to start with 0 this time, right? Sorry. So we're at $150. Now, how many times did that $150 repeat?
6.
Why 6? From the 4th to the 10th, or what's 10 minus 4? 6. All right, so you guys see the trick, right? 6 days. From 4 to 4/9. All right, what's my next number?
For 5 days.
For 5 days, from the 10th to the 15th, 5 days. 410 to technically 414. All right, now be savvy with this. What's the next number?
It's technically a negative $20.
Yes, it is, and it is a negative $20. They have to keep track of that correctly, and it can happen. While you're calculating the average daily balance, your balance may drop below zero. That's perfectly okay. There are some times when your credit card will actually send you money, right? If you have a negative balance long enough, your credit card will actually send you a refund check. Because you return stuff and you paid for it initially, now you get the money back, right? So anyways, how long does that last?
6 days.
6 days, from the 15th to the 21st. What's my next number?
20. Oh, actually, it'd be 150.
Zero.
It is the $20, but what's
But you also
negative?
put 20 and 150. The 20
Okay.
that makes it 0, but the 150 was bought on the same day, so it should be 150.
Okay, so here's where it starts to get a little bit weird. How do you handle 2 days on the same date? Okay? You have to handle these both together, right?
Mhm.
So technically, you need to add 20 and 150 for the 21st, okay? So this literally turns into 150 because we have to put both of those days together. When 2 things happen on the same date, make them happen together, okay? There are times where I will actually say that I had $0 here if I add 20. But then the number of days that $0 would happen would be 0 days, because what's 21 minus 21?
0.
0. So again, that number is temporary only. All right? Now, how many days does that last? 9. 421 to 429. And what's my last number?
450.
And how many days does that one go?
3.
Why 3?
26 days, and you got 29 in the billing period, so you subtract it, you get 3.
Ah,
I'll say that.
26 days used up in the billing cycle so far. It's a 29-day billing cycle, so there has to be 3 days on the last row. Okay, now, average them up. What are we going to do to average them?
And 150 for 6 days. Oh, yeah.
Yep, 150 for 6 days. $900. 180 for 5 days.
900.
Kind of nice. 6 days at negative 20.
That'd be actually negative 120.
Yeah, literally negative 120. It is okay. There's nothing wrong with it. Just make sure that you add a negative correctly, right? I.e. subtract. What's 9 days at 150? And then last but not least, 3 days at 450.
1350 again.
Yeah.
I love it when numbers work like that.
Now, what do you do with all those numbers?
Yeah.
Add them up. What do we get when we add them up? 27 and 18. 4,500 minus 120.
43. Does that sound about right?
Yep. 4380. What do I do with the 4380, folks? Divide by 29. average daily balance.
151 and 3 cents.
So this is just calculating an average over a billing cycle number of days, okay? You could, if you wanted to, literally write the numbers out one at a time, right? I mean, you could say, well, I borrowed 150, and then 150, and then 150. Nothing wrong with it, right? I did have a student once who, that's how they did all of these problems. They literally wrote every number down, and then added them all up. To each their own. If you know you're going to get the 30 or 29 numbers, this is not necessarily a bad or good way to do it per se. Whatever works best for you. Alright? Not bad?
No.
Folks, that's chapter 14. Alright?
In a nutshell, right?
Yeah. In a big nutshell.
Yeah.
Is it 2 through 16 or 2 through 18?
16.
16? Yeah, 8 problems, folks. Now, granted, in these 8 problems, at least 2 or 3 of them have like 5 parts. But the parts are like what we did in those loans, where you have to say, well, what's the down payment, what's the amount financed, what's the monthly payment, what's the finance charge, that kind of stuff. Okay. All right. So, anyways, that's chapter 14. So, chapter 15. So, chapter 14 was short-term loans. Chapter 15 is long-term loans. What do you call a long-term loan?
Mortgage.
A mortgage. Please note, folks, that there are different regulations on loans based on whether or not they are considered a mortgage or not a mortgage. So lenders, if you're lending for less than 10 years, you're considered a short-term loan, and you actually have different rules you have to follow by the SEC. Whereas once you start dealing with mortgages, the loans are actually packaged and sold and used slightly differently, and they do have to be at least a 10-year loan. So if you go to get a mortgage, if it's not 10 years, then they won't call it a mortgage for you. They literally won't. All right?
Well, a car loan.
Essentially, yeah. All right. The cool thing about chapter 15, folks, is that everything is essentially the same as chapter 14. Okay? Except the numbers are just going to be a lot bigger. Because you're borrowing the money for longer times, and let's face it, folks, a house costs usually a lot more than a car. Now, not always, because there's some really crazy cars out there, but the idea is, okay, best way to do this is to just dive in, all right? So, are we buying in Madison or Janesville to start with? Okay, so we buy a $250,000 house in Madison. That's about the average price of a home in Madison right now. It's maybe a little high, a little lower than that. It's maybe $220,000 or $229,000.
You sure? James is not far much below that. Certain areas, yeah.
Really? I thought Janesville's average was like in the 160s.
It's gone up.
Really?
Depends on the area. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Let's see. How much are you going to put down on your house, folks?
Depends on what 10%.
Well, 10%. If you put down 10%, what are you going to get hit with?
Oh, yeah. Better go 20.
Better go 20. But you guys know about private mortgage insurance? Right. Private mortgage insurance is an insurance you have to take out for your bank if you do not put at least 20% of your mortgage down up front. If you do not put 20% down, they'll basically ding you for an extra $80 to $250 a month for insurance on them. Not on you, but on them, because you are considered high risk until you own 20% of your house. So if you are ever thinking or are going to be buying a house anytime soon, please accumulate 20% of the value of your house in cash up front so that you do not have to pay the private mortgage insurance, okay? This is, very serious business because it's years of paying until you get rid of it too. All right? So, we're going to put 20% down. So it's kind of why my wife and I waited for 2.5 years before we bought our house up in Madison, because when we first moved there, we had a little bit of money, but not enough to put 20% down, and so I was just like, nope, I'm not even going to look until we've got 20%. All right. Finance the rest. For 30 years at, did I have good credit or bad, folks?
Average.
Average, let's suppose I did it for 7%. When I first bought my house, that's what my mortgage was at, sitting around 7%. This is in the 90s, folks, so it was a while ago. All right? So, all the same questions we asked in chapter 14, you did in chapter 15. So, I'm going to ask you for, how much did you put down? I'm going to ask you, what is your amount financed? I am going to ask you, what's your monthly payment? I'm going to ask you, what was your finance charge? And then at the very end, I'm going to ask you for the deferred payment price. And all of the meanings for these words are exactly the same in a mortgage as they are in a short-term loan. Okay, so the down payment's the amount that you put down. The amount financed is the amount you borrow. The monthly is how much you're paying a month. The finance charge is the interest. The deferred payment price is how much you really paid for the item. All that shit's the same. Okay? So, remember, numbers are just way the hell bigger. And these numbers will make you sick. They made me sick for a long time. Okay? So, how much did I have to put down in my house? Yeah. That's the first number that makes you sick, right? If you're going to buy a house in Madison, folks, you need to have $50,000 in cash before you can even really start looking. Again, there's nothing wrong with having to get private mortgage insurance, folks. It's just an extra cost that you need to be aware of. And it literally is somewhere between $100 and $300 a month, depending on who you finance with. Okay? So, how much did I borrow? $200,000. Note, that's kind of a lot of money. Do you think you're going to pay some interest on this? Oh yeah. All right, so monthly. Folks, the difference in calculating the monthly payment from chapter 14 to chapter 15 is go to that very last page of the tables, and instead of using the top half of the tables where it's all in months, use the bottom half of the table on page 45 where it's amortization chart in years.
That's crazy.
And the process is exactly the same. Take the amount you financed, $200,000. Remember, divide it by 1,000, and then go to your table and find your number, right? So 7%, 30 years.
666.
Oh, that's my favorite number.
Now you convert that one to a decimal then, or you go multiply by 6.66.
Multiply by 6.66.
Okay.
1,330.
That's your monthly payment, folks. And that was about my monthly payment for my house when I bought it initially. That hurt.
And that doesn't include
That doesn't include insurance. That doesn't include, maintenance. That,
escrow and all that,
yeah, it doesn't include property taxes. Blah.
yeah.
And I live in Madison, folks. Property taxes in Madison suck. All right, so how are we going to find out the finance charge for this now? It's exactly the same way. How much am I going to pay in monthly payments?
32.
$1,332. How many months am I paying this?
30 times 12.
30 times 12, 360 months, right? Because it's 30 years. Yes, that will be a big number.
That's a huge number.
Now, what do I subtract? the amount that I borrowed, right? Be careful with that. Please do not subtract the price. That's often a mistake students make.
Still usual.
So, how much interest am I going to wind up paying over 30 years to buy this house, folks?
279,520.
That's
There's
about
me.
right. That's about right.
There's no decimal point in that number, folks. I'm basically buying my house twice. And that's pretty much the way it works, okay? Unless your interest rate dips below 5%, you are basically going to buy your house twice. Okay? Now remember that you're also borrowing a ton of money, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you're borrowing $200,000 frickin' dollars, right? I mean, so you're borrowing a lot of money. So you should expect to pay a reasonable amount of interest. Now, is $279,000 some odd dollars reasonable? Well, that's up for somebody else to decide.
One time it was 12 and 13%
Oh, yeah.
mortgages.
Yeah, my parents' first house that they bought, they paid 15.5% of their first mortgage. Granted, the house also cost $30,000.
Yeah.
All right, so yes, this is how much it costs. So how much am I actually going to pay for my house, folks? What's the deferred payment price?
479,520.
Yeah. Ouch. 250,000 plus 279,520.
Oh, wait a minute, wait a minute. No, I'm wrong.
529,520.
Yeah.
So that $250,000 house is worth more than $500,000 of payments, folks. And that's just the way mortgages work, folks. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Okay, you're gonna pay, and you're gonna pay for a long time. And yeah, it sucks, but that's the way it works. Okay, now. The only other topic we have to cover in chapter 15 is the amortization table. That's the only other thing, okay? And the amortization table is just schedule/table that explains how payments pay off the loan. And folks, this amortization table applies to both short-term loans and long-term loans. So we tend to do it in chapter 15, but it actually applies to both chapter 14 loans and chapter 15 loans, okay? So an amortization table just shows you how much your payments are paying on your house every month, okay? And so what you have to do is figure out, well, how much interest do I have to pay? Subtract the interest off your payment, and then however much is left, that's how much you subtract off your mortgage. Okay? It's exactly what we did back in chapter 10 when we had a short-term loan for like 120 days and we made 2 or 3 payments early. That's essentially what a mortgage amortization table shows, except that it's a scheduled thing because you pay every month. Okay? Note, and again, this is going to be weird, but bear with me. Note, interest on a mortgage uses simple interest. There's nothing fancy about this, folks. It's all simple interest. Okay? So, how does it work? Okay. it's mainly a 4-column table. I'm going to put the month over on the far left just because that normally happens when they give you this table. The first line, folks, just tells you how much money you borrowed. Okay? Month 0, if you will, basically says you borrowed $200,000. Okay? So, in month 1, how much do we pay in the first month of our mortgage?
It's
$1,332, right? All right, now, we need to pay the interest. That payment will always pay interest first. Interest, folks, is simple. How do we calculate simple interest again? I equals PRT. How much did I borrow? $200,000. What was the rate of my mortgage?
7%.
7%. Make sure you convert it to a decimal. And how long did I borrow the money in the first month?
Oh, no,
The first month, right? Because this is monthly payments. How many years are there, folks, in 1 month? 1 over 12. Because this is all specialized to go 1 month at a time. And this is literally how they calculate how much interest you owe every month. So how much interest did I have to pay because I borrowed $200,000 at 7% for 1 stupid month?
Yeah, right. Seems like, I don't know. I come up with $1,166 and rounded to 67 cents.
Uh-huh. That's how much freaking interest you owe for borrowing that money for 1 month. Uh-huh. 1166.67. So your payment, folks, pays that first. So how much of your house did you really buy from paying $1,332?
Not enough.
Not very much. So subtract those two, folks.
$165.33.
That's how much of your house you bought from that $1,332 check that you sent them. A whole whopping $165.33. You bought maybe a door. Maybe, if it was a cheap door. That's it, folks. Now, what do you do with that $165.33? Subtract it off the principal, right? And that's how much you owe starting the next month. So 199,834.67. And folks, rinse and repeat 360 times. And try not to vomit on the way.
It gets bad. It's like what? 20 years before you finally averages out almost. It's pathetic.
My wife and I, folks, after 8 years, we got to the point where our interest and our principal paid were the same.
8 years?
Yeah, it took 8. We were paying a lot of money
I was
extra
going to say,
every month. But we were paying extra every month.
I was going to
right?
say, because yeah, it's usually about half.
Yeah, it usually takes about
15 years before you start equaling
it's
out.
usually about half, right? But this one, I mean, we were paying a lot extra every month. I basically wrote a $1,500 check every month for the first like 5 years of our mortgage, just so that I could pay it off sooner, right? We took a 30-year loan out, but I really wanted a 20-year one when we bought it, but that would have forced us to have an even larger monthly payment, and that scared me, so we did 30 and then just paid at the 20 rate. And whenever we didn't have enough money, we would scale our payment back to only $1,332 instead of the $1,500 or $1,600 that I was paying. All right, so let's do month number 2. And let's say, folks, that in month number 2, we pay an extra $500 because we won a $1,000 scratcher at the gas station, you know. And so we're like, well,
Yeah, right.
You're responsible.
you're going to take 500 of it and just blow it on whatever you think is fun, and then the other 500 you're going to put down in your house so that you can pay less interest, right? Because that's the sort of thing you do when you win like a large chunk of money, right? Right?
What world you live in? Come on.
So we're going to pay an extra 500, and maybe that'll make a big difference, right? Let's see if it does.
As long as you specify that it goes to principal.
Oh yeah, you do have to specify that it goes to principal and not to the interest for next month. All right, so that $1,832. What's it going to pay first?
Interest?
How do I find the interest?
Wouldn't you take the 199, 83467?
199, 83467. That's the whole point, right, folks? Is that every month that principal gets a little bit lower. And yeah, it looks like it's a paltry sum here at the beginning, but eventually it starts to pick up, right? But the process is still the same. Multiply by 7%, multiply by 1/12. What's our interest in the second month?
1165.70.
Look at that, folks. We almost got a whole dollar more paid off. $1165.70. So how much did we pay on the mortgage?
666.
Look at that. We really bought a lot of our house that time, folks. Woohoo! So subtract that from the 199,834. What is that? One.
I don't want
6837. This is going to make a huge difference, right? So let's go to the third month and go back to paying $1,332. So how much is our interest going to be next month? It's going to be way down there, right? It's going to be like $1,100, right? Again, folks, the pattern stays the same. So what's 199, 16837 times 0.07 times 112. What's our interest in the third month?
1161.82.
Oh. Sure made a huge difference, didn't it? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you've looked at mortgages before, a $4 difference really is huge, and so you're like, wow. And when you go wow over $4, that means you bought a house. Yeah, because $4 sure seems like a big deal. How much of our house did we buy this month now that we went back to our normal payment?
170.
170.18.
Yeah.
Subtract. What are we down to?
198,998.90.
One more time, folks, and then we'll call it a day. Let's pay $1,332 again, just so that you get the pattern straight. $198, $998. 19 times 0.07 times 1/12. Back to a more regular number.
1168.62.
Oh, exactly $1. That's kind of cool. So all you have to do on your dollar amount is add a dollar, right? So it's 171.18. And what is our mortgage finally down to after 4 months? 198,8 2, 7, and a penny. Mortgages absolutely
It's just
suck, folks.
flying.
Oh yeah, Advice from the wise: if you ever do buy a house, or when you buy a house, don't look at this.
No, it makes you sad.
Yeah, it really is nauseating. It'll be painful. Try your hardest not to look at all possible. It is fun once you get closer to the end, though, when the numbers flip, when you're paying $100 in interest and your payment is almost all principal instead of just being almost all interest. But that takes a god-awful long time. And remember, folks, a lot of people say, well, I'm never going to buy a house because of this. You have to live somewhere, folks. If you're not paying a mortgage, what are you paying?
Rent.
Rent. And if you pay rent for 30 years, what do you have at the end of 30 years of renting? Nothing. How much do you have if you buy a house?
It all depends.
A house.
Depends how many times you can find it.
So note, folks, if you would, it's another 6 or 8 problems. I can't remember if it goes to 16 or 18. It's not that many. So if you would, work on chapter 14 and 15 over Thanksgiving, and we'll take a look at those on Tuesday. Next week, please note, next week we'll do chapter 22. That's the statistics chapter. That's the last chapter of new stuff. The week after that, we'll take our last test. And the week after that, we take our final exam. And then you are done. Okay? So, 3 more weeks. Tough it out. Crank out some homework.
Crazy 3
And
weeks.
finish strong. Alright?